from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, treating milk. It's been the same for over 100 years, how a new process could change things around the world.
It's a far more gentle process.
They can specifically state that we do not want hemp grown in those states.
Want to plant hemp? What you need to know before you try to put seed in the ground, as more rain continues to put planting further behind.
And we're going to try to go to July 1st.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The rain just not letting up in many places of the country. Areas like Philadelphia receiving more than 4 inches of rain in just 3 hours, and all the water is running out of places to go. Check out this video shared by Michael Condon on Twitter. He lives in Delaware County, Ohio. He spotted a carp swimming in what he says was his nicest bean field. Once again, flash flood watches were up for portions of the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and continuing into parts of the Northeast. And the chances for more rain are expected on into the weekend. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman kicks off our team coverage. Mike, the flooding potential is still there.
Yeah, Clinton, no doubt about it, and mainly because we continue to have the rain that we've had. You know, it's interesting, 3 or 4 weeks ago when we talked about changing weather patterns, we did. And for a week or two, we had drier weather. But now we've gone into another wet pattern, not even close to the pattern that we had with the big trough in the west and the ridge in the southeast, but it's still a wet pattern. And part of that is just all that humidity in the air. I mean, this is the amount of rain over the past 7 days. Everything in red here is 5 inches plus, and in some cases 8 inches plus when you see small areas of purple like you see southeast of Wichita there, a few spots northeast of Dallas. These areas have just had tremendous amounts of rain once again over the past 7 days. And southern Indiana, from Indianapolis to Louisville, has been slammed, parts of Illinois, southern Ohio, and also parts of Kentucky. And we're just going to continue to see some areas of showers and thunderstorms as we head through time, although I do think the pattern might let up a little bit as we head through the next 7 to 10 days. We'll talk more about that coming up in weather.
This rain comes on top of what is already a wet late spring. Some states asking for disaster assistance because the waterlogged season. Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine asking USDA to issue a disaster declaration to make aid available to farmers who have been unable to plant or will face both plant and financial problems due to the sloppy weather. Some farmers still aiming at planting late to mud a crop in the ground.
We probably only got 55% of our corn planted that we intended. And right now I think we're at 60% planted on the soybeans, and we're going to try to go to July 1st.
USDA saying 68% of the state's corn crop is planted. For soybeans, it's 46%. Michigan farmers also struggling with wet conditions right now. Governor Gretchen Whitmer is asking the federal government to approve the state's farmers for disaster assistance. Whitmer made the request in a letter to U.S. Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue. As of June 9th, farmers could only get out in their fields for about 3.5 days. Less than half the soybean crop has been planted and about 63% of the corn crop. Soggy fields have also prevented harvesting hay for livestock. And because of the wet spring, USDA has agreed to move up the date farmers can start haying and grazing on the cover crops they're growing on prevent plant acres. The normal date for producers is November 1st. The new date will be September 1st. That applies just for this year. There are areas where the waters are starting to recede, and that is good news when it comes to shipping. The Missouri River between St. Louis and Kansas City is now back open to boat and barge traffic. Flooding forced the Coast Guard to close the area for about 2 weeks. The Mississippi River remains closed in the St. Louis Harbor area as it has been since early May. Some U.S. ag product is on the move overseas. USDA announcing 2 flash sales, including 189,000 metric tons of soybeans for delivery to unknown destinations and 122,000 metric tons of corn to Mexico. And the agency also releasing sales data for last week showing 187,000 metric tons of wheat were sold. The top buyer, Algeria. Corn sales saw only 38,000 metric tons. That's down 77% from the previous week and down 90% off the 4-week average. But soybean sales, they were up 34% from the prior week and the 4-week average, with top sales reported to unknown destinations in Egypt. The USDA's Economic Research Service now says it expects ag exports to reach $137 billion this season. It says ag imports will be a total of $129 billion. The $8 billion surplus would be the lowest since 2006. It says that although ag exports have increased in value since 2016, the value of imports has risen at a slightly faster rate, and that's led to a declining trade balance. As the trade war with China continues, there are new numbers highlighting how much one group says Americans are having to pay for it. A group called Tariffs Hurt the Heartland estimate that consumers have paid nearly $22 billion in additional tariffs. Specifically, the group claims Americans have paid $15 billion in higher costs due to specifically on tariffs on Chinese imports. But White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow believes the economic burden is more on China.
In terms of the economic burden, we feel the bigger part of that burden will come on the China side because number one, if they want to sell into the tariffs, they're going to have to slash prices, which means they will lose money and damage their economy. Number two, some American firms have already begun actions to shift production from China to the United States. Number three, pardon my phrase, elasticities of demand. American customers of China products don't have to stay with China. They can go to Vietnam, Bangladesh, Mexico. So that's where the economic burden, we believe, falls most heavily on the Chinese.
Getting through all of the trade turmoil may take more than one aid payment this year. Farm Bureau President Zippy Duvall says farmers may need a third round of help in 2020. Duvall says that if political infighting ahead and during the 2020 election keeps the administration from landing or finishing trade deals, farmers may need more help. During an interview with Reuters, Duvall saying, quote, if we're not going to get USMCA finished, if we're not going to get the solution to our problems in China or Japan, then we need to be talking about another payment to try to hold farmers over until that gets done. Now, the administration has said it plans to offer a second round of payments this year. Those are expected to roll out in August. Tariffs are factoring into the numbers in the latest Rural Main Street Index. The index for June rose above growth neutral for the month. That's the sixth straight time it's happened in the past 7 months. It now stands at 52.2. More than 1 in 4 of the bank CEOs surveyed reported rising loan defaults due to farm finance issues, and almost half of the bankers reported that due to those financial issues, farmers in their area have either sold their farms or left them. It says higher commodity prices and rebuilding from recent floods boosted the index for the month. And despite the trade war with China, more than 69% of bankers supported either raising or continuing the tariffs with China. All right, is Plant 19 over? We'll talk about the dwindling hopes of putting crops in the ground coming up in analysis. And later, milk that lasts 60 days. These Aussie inventors say they've cracked the code on a new processing technique. Their story today in the country.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Oil on the rise on Thursday. That's after Iran shot down a U.S. military drone, increasing tensions between the two countries. At one point, oil rose more than 3%. Oil has been lower recently, pulled down by slowing economic growth and the trade dispute between the U.S. and China. Soybeans up double digits once again on Thursday, with traders again focused on the wet weather. Here's the latest from the CME.
And we have seen a nice pullback there at the beginning of the week, something that we were talking about Monday in our daily reports, looking for a retest of that December contract, 450 to 455. This was previous resistance at the end of the May and kind of a secondary breakout point last week. So previous resistance now becomes technical support. Obviously, weather going to continue to be a huge issue, not only affecting planting progress, but also putting a big question mark over potential yield and yield loss on what has already been planted. So we think there's still room to work higher as those concerns continue to mount. Now moving over to soybeans, similar situation. Obviously soybeans have a little bit later planting window, a lot more resilient of a plant, but we are getting towards the back half of June, and a lot is still yet to be planted, and wet weather is still in the forecast over the coming weeks. Wheat looks to be the weakest link here. If the grains soften up a little bit, I think wheat is going to be the leader to the downside. We managed to hold the 200-day moving average over the past couple of sessions. That comes in 517 3/4. This is a must-hold area for the bulls.
Sam Hudson with Corn Belt Marketing, our guest today. Sam, let's talk about where we're at on this crop progress. There's been a lot of debate about, how much is planted. Is it totally planted? We're almost to the end of June. How much more can we even plant, given the numbers that USDA is throwing out there? Where do you sit on this?
Well, until we see an actual printed number from USDA, which we're going to get at least an update on that next week, you almost have to focus on just the production potential in general, as opposed to just, this is what I think acres are, this is what I think yield could be. Let's look at the scenario where acres are this or that, and if they're this or that, how could that impact yield? One of the premises I feel like we could see a bigger surprise in bean acres. USDA cut yield so much in June, 10 bushel the acre.
Right.
Difficult for me to see them coming in and now taking away 6 million acres of planted corn acres too. So I think the way the farmer was incentivized to try to plant corn if he could. You had situations out here where a guy may have had a piece of ground he was going to plant beans on, but it was the only piece he could get on without getting stuck. And I think that filtered into the crop insurance decisions and maxing out base acres and so forth. And there's a lot of corn that got stuck in the ground even in the wet acres, but it's tiny and it's going to be a long time figuring out what it's going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you go through the next couple of weeks, we've got some big reports coming from USDA. What numbers are you watching for to see that we're going to drive this market?
We have to keep an eye on demand. We know there's cuts coming in exports, but ethanol is kind of sustaining itself for the short term at least, because the products are also rising, keeping them in the game, and that's why some of these bids have been so strong to get grain out of the farmer's hands. So farmers are now bullish. All the bull spreads have now kind of flipped the charts. So I think long term you're going to have breaks be for buying. You had everyone kind of focused on this whole variable storage rate thing for corn, and we've just completely reversed that story. And I think you blew a lot of those people out of that market that were looking for something like that. So now we kind of come back down to earth, reevaluate, see where we're at on acres, and then get into trying to evaluate what kind of production we could actually have based on weather.
And what kind of harvest we can have on which acres are we actually going to cut.
And how many beans we can even get in the ground at this point.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sam. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
For marketing advice, call Sam Hudson with Corn Belt Marketing at 800-655-3380. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman here looking at the drought monitor. And Mike, I don't remember bringing this little amount of drought on the map.
It's
ever.
Amazing. I mean, the middle of the country, obviously there's none, but it's kind of fringe areas seeing some drought. You can see on the latest drought monitor, there's some severe drought there in western Washington, a little bit northern fringes of North Dakota, and still a few spots in southeastern Georgia. And that's about it. There is some moderate drought in places surrounding those sections, plus parts of New Mexico. You can see, though, 4 weeks ago, it was looking kind of similar. We have had it get a little bit worse in all three of those places I just mentioned, the southeast, northern North Dakota, and western Washington over the past 4 weeks, but nothing extensive so far, and I don't really see anything developing out of all of that in those drought areas as we go forward. We are watching a storm system, two of them actually, the eastern Rockies, so eastern Colorado, eastern Montana, as we start the day today. Complexes of thunderstorms are pretty typical then north of a warm front, and that's what we're going to see over the next couple of nights. We sometimes call them nocturnal thunderstorms. They develop at night. They're raging at 7 a.m. and then they weaken during the day. Did you notice how that batch from Iowa into northern Missouri weakens on our computer model as it heads into the Ohio River Valley? Then things redevelop at night. There's 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, parts of Iowa again, into Illinois, a little bit farther northeast than the previous one, and then that one falls apart as it dives off to the southeast. There will be hit and miss showers and thunderstorms in the heat and humidity each afternoon south of the front, and there will be some areas developing mainly afternoon and evening for the western states as well, but those will be really hit and miss. Activity over the past 24 hours, adding in the next 36 hours for precipitation, shows where those complexes of storms are forecasted to move, basically from Iowa across Illinois and southeastward into Kentucky. There's the heat. And there's the cooler air. Only 60s for highs around parts of the Great Lakes. Many 90s finally showing up. First time we've really seen the heat so far this year. Muggy tonight for the southern plains. That heat starts to go a little bit farther northeast as we head through tomorrow afternoon. There's the jet stream. It's all because of this ridge that builds into the western Great Lakes over the weekend and then gets slammed down again by the next trough storm system moving through as we head into the early part of the week. And then you can see the ridge building for most of the plains by late next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We'll head to Springerville, Arizona. First of all, mostly sunny, rather windy today, high of 82. Alexandria, Louisiana, muggy with times of sunshine and clouds, high up to 94. And Akron, Ohio, partly sunny and more comfortable, high of 74.
Growing hemp is catching on, but navigating the legal waters is still an issue. We get some advice next, and later, milk has been processed and pasteurized the same way for decades. Could that be changing? These inventors say yes. Their story in the country.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Farm Journal hosted its first hemp college in Kentucky this week with over 500 growers and potential growers, businesses, and companies attending from around the country to learn more. As interest of hemp production heightens, there's still some confusion on hemp rules and regulations. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon talks to a top lawyer who sorts out what you need to know.
Matthew, growers have a lot of questions when it comes to the 2014 Farm Bill and the rules and regs with that, when it comes to the new Farm Bill that's not implemented yet and the new hemp language that's in it. Can you give us some clarity of what growers can grow and their regulations that they need to be aware of as well?
What the growers need to be aware of is that what Congress did was give 3 options, okay? It's all going to be taken care of by the USDA. That's the administrative body that's going to oversee it. So each individual state is going to be able to make a choice. They are going to present their own plan to the USDA, which will give an outline for growers and what they can follow. The USDA is going to present a plan, and if the state doesn't want to come up with their own, they will automatically adopt the federal plan. Or individual states who do not want hemp grown in their state can actually specifically choose to say, we do not want hemp grown here. And as of right now, I believe there's 4 states that are not growing, and if they continue to go that way, they can specifically state that we do not want hemp grown in those states.
So even when 2020 gets here, those 4 states, if they still don't want it in their state, the federal level doesn't take over. They can still choose that route.
That's exactly right, yeah.
How long does it take for a grower to potentially get a permit in a state that it is legal to grow hemp? How long does that usually
Generally
take?
about 60 to 90 days from the date of the cutoff for applications. It usually takes about 60 to 90 days depending on how many applications are given to their individual administrative body and how long it takes to process, but generally 60 to 90 days.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And of course, this is a topic that is not going to go away. So, Clinton, that's it for us in Kentucky. We'll head it on back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks, Betsy. When we come back, milk that lasts 60 days. These Aussie inventors say it's possible, and they've invented a new way to do it. That story next. An Australian inventor claims he's created a new way of treating milk without heat, allowing it to last over 60 days. The process has already passed safety testing, and experts say it could change the way that milk is exported around the world. The concepts around milk processing have been pretty steady since the 1800s, but these Queensland inventors claim that's about to change.
It's a brand new technology, firstly. It's first of its kind in the world, and it provides us with an alternative to pasteurised milk.
They say this new way of handling milk without heat makes it taste fresher than milk sold in supermarkets, and it lasts longer, up to 60 days.
It's very much like, if you ever tasted it, milk straight out of the vat in the dairy. That's what the taste is like, a very rich, creamy flavour. So it tastes great.
Farmers hope the breakthrough could mean good news after a rough few years for the dairy industry.
It sounds like a really exciting development. I think there'll be a great opportunity probably for export into Asia.
Queensland company Naturo has secured international patents for its new process after 3 years of research, although it's yet to be licensed for sale.
They've supplied us with sufficient data to demonstrate that the process that they put forward is in fact equivalent or better than the process of traditional pasteurisation.
The company won't reveal the secret to its new milk technology.
What I can say, it does not rely on heat as the means to kill the bugs. So it's a far more gentle process.
It's now in talks about setting up a pilot factory in hopes that its milk can make its way to shelves by next year. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. For all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.